Hello, my name is Kirke Cook. I am the curator and the manager of the Andrew Carnegie Birthplace Museum.
And my name's Annie Leverton and I'm the Visitor Services Officer at the museum. Today we'll be showing you around the Birthplace Cottage and the Museum Hall, more or less in chronological order.
Steel tycoon, stockbroker, writer, lecturer, entrepreneur and philanthropist, Andrew Carnegie was one of the great Scots of the 19th century. He was born here in Dunfermline on the 25th of November 1835 and he died in New York on the 11th of August 1919.
We're starting our tour today in the Birthplace Cottage. This cottage is a weaver's cottage and was built in the late 1700s, probably between 1782 and 1801 by a weaver called David Black. It was one of a number of other cottages like this in the area that were home to handloom weavers and their families. It is now one of the only ones left standing. The reason we have the cottage today is because Louise Carnegie, that's Andrew's wife, actually bought it. The cottage was a secret 60th birthday present for Andrew. Louise bought it using a legacy bequeathed to her by her grandfather, George Whitfield. That answers the question, what do you give a man who has everything? The Carnegie Dunfermline Trust was established in 1903. Louise asked the trustees to look after the cottage and eventually it was opened up to the public in 1908, although at this point a tenant still lived in it. Earlier on in 1899, the Malpas family rented the cottage. They seem to have been there until 1911. The room in which Andrew was born was kept open as a visitor attraction, all while the family were looking after it. This photo you can see of the cottage entrance, and there you can see the Malpas family children playing outside. Andrew's parents, William and Margaret, moved into the cottage when they got married in 1834. Andrew was born here, but eventually the family moved to a slightly bigger property on Edgar Street, also in Dunfermline. The Carnegies had 3 children. There was Andrew, the eldest, and then there was Anne, a middle child who was born in 1839, but who did not survive beyond her 2nd birthday. Their youngest son was Thomas, who was born in 1843. William Carnegie worked as a handloom weaver. Dunfermline was at the centre of the Scottish fine linen industry. Approximately 1 in 4 people out of the town's population of 12,000 inhabitants worked as a weaver. That's a quarter. Another 2,000 people were employed in supporting industries such as yarn boiling, pattern design, fabric dyeing. You get the picture.
This handloom is very similar to the one that Andrew Carnegie's father, William, would have used. This particular loom did not belong to him. His was sold with the rest of their belongings in order to save up money for their journey to America. This particular handloom, which still works by the way, was gifted to the museum by Lauder Technical College, now known as Fife College, in 1920s. Lauder Technical College was founded by Andrew Carnegie and his cousin George Lauder in the memory of Andrew's uncle, George Lauder Sr., in 1899.
At that time, the floors would have been covered in earth, particularly around the looms. This allowed moisture to be spread on the area, causing a certain amount of humidity that was necessary to stop the threads from drying out and breaking. There are 8 pedals underneath in the pit below the loom. The largest foot pedal, or lever, is on the left-hand side. The metal jacquard equipment on top of the loom incorporates a large square box on the right, which is operated by that foot pedal, causing the block to revolve a quarter turn each time. At the same time, these jacquard pattern cards come round and are read by the loom, which produces the pattern. There were 3 rooms upstairs, The room directly opposite the top of the stairs actually has a trapdoor in the floor, which would have been used by the women working up the stairs to drop fully wound bobbins down to the men working at their looms below. At the top of the stairs on the left, this is the birthplace room, probably the most important room in the whole museum. On the right you can see two recessed beds. Andrew was probably born in the bigger one near the door. His birthday is the 25th of November 1835.
The only original piece of furniture here in the cottage, dating back to Andrew's childhood in Dunfermline, is this piece here, Andrew's father's writing desk. The desk was given to Henderson family when the Carnegies moved to America in 1840s, and they in turn gave it back to the museum in 1924. It is such a wonderful piece to have here in the collection, as it clearly demonstrates that although the family was really poor, they were very well educated, they knew how to read and write, and were very interested in books.
Can you see the key on the desk? Now it might just look like an ordinary key, but it's actually quite special. This is the Pittencrieff Park key. Pittencrieff was the estate of the Hunt family, who'd extended their holdings by enriching on Dunfermline's common lands. All the Morrisons and their descendants, including Andrew, were banned from entering the estate. In the early 1900s, the Hunt family had fallen into debt, and the Carnegies bought the estate in 1903. Andrew Carnegie eventually gifted the park to the people of Dunfermline.
This is a portrait of Andrew's mother, Margaret, who was the driving force in his life, always encouraging her boys to do their best. She was also the one who took out a loan which enabled Andrew to buy his first shares in America. Although adored by Andrew, she was less well liked by Andrew's wife, Louise, who in her autobiography says that Andrew's mother was the most unpleasant woman she'd ever met. In fact, Andrew and Louise did not marry until Margaret had passed away, as in Margaret's opinion, no woman was good enough for her Andrew.
Andrew's uncle, George Lauder, played an important role in Andrew's early life. With encouragement from Uncle George Lauder, Andrew grew his love of Scottish history, stories and poetry. Andrew Carnegie went to school at the age of 8, which was quite common at the time. There were 33 schools in the Dunfermline area back then. Andrew's school was set up by Mr. Martin, and it was called the Rowland Free School. The fee to attend was 2 shillings and a quarter, paid in weekly instalments. This tuition fee was low. The best schools in town charged twice as much, but the Carnegies could not afford that. He earned his first penny actually reciting a poem for his teacher. The poem was A Man Was Made to Mourn by Robert Burns, and it was in front of the whole school. Andrew became a keen reader of books which belonged to the local weavers' library. This small library had been set up in 1804 by his grand-uncle William Carnegie. In this way, Andrew could access books which his family could never have afforded to buy. Following the death of Andrew Carnegie in 1919, his widow Louise Whitfield Carnegie submitted a proposal to the Carnegie Dunfermline Trust to be allowed to build an extension onto the original birthplace cottage. This building was to be a museum that would inspire future generations. Work began in 1925 on the design by architect James Shearer RSA. He used the characteristics and details derived from the 17th century lowland Scotland, and also materials synonymous with Dunfermline such as sandstone and Cornish slates. Some of the writing on the building is also quite similar to that of Dunfermline Abbey. There are many reasons people left for America. America was seen as the land of opportunity, but William Carnegie didn't want to go and would have preferred to have stayed in Dunfermline. That winter was very severe, coupled with economic depression. It was time to leave for America. The family sold their possessions to fund the trip, but they were still £20 short, which is equivalent to £3,000 today. They borrowed some money from Ailey Ferguson, who was Andrew's midwife. The Carnegies were to head to the Pittsburgh area of Pennsylvania. That's where Margaret's sisters Annie and Kitty had emigrated earlier. The Carnegies took the cheapest route. They started in Dunfermline, heading to Charlestown. From there they went across the Firth of Forth, along the Forth and Clyde Canal to Glasgow, then Broomielaw Port. They sailed on the boat the Wiscasset on the 16th of June. There were 140 passengers travelling on the Wiscasset alongside the Carnegies. They arrived in New York on the 14th of August. On their arrival to Allegheny City, which is now part of Pittsburgh, the Carnegie family rented a house from Andrew's aunt, Annie Aitken. Again, William wove his damask linen on a loom on the ground floor of the house. Unfortunately, the demand for beautiful hand-woven linen was very low among housewives. Again, Margaret had to step in mending shoes and running a grocery store to make ends meet. William died in October 1855 at the age of 50. To supplement the family's low income, Andrew was sent out to work. His first job was when he was 13 years old, and that was a bobbin boy at the Anchor Cotton Mills. He earned $1.20 per week. Thanks to the help of his uncle Hogan, Andrew soon got a job with the O'Reilly Telegraph Company as a telegraph messenger boy. He was paid $2.50 per week. This was a significant improvement from working as a bobbin boy. In this job as a telegraph messenger boy, this is where Andrew excelled by using his good memory. By observing, memorising and repeating, he taught himself how to decipher Morse code just by ear. He was one of the first people in the USA able to do this. Operators normally had to write down the different codes before translating a message. The fact Andrew could do it just by listening would save time and was much more economical, a highly sought after skill. He soon was promoted and became a telegraph operator, earning $4 per week.
On display here are some of the books Andrew Carnegie borrowed from the private library of Colonel James Anderson of Allegheny City. Colonel Anderson opened up his private library to working class boys in 1849. It was so successful that Anderson had to hire a librarian, buy more books, and limit the access to the library to apprentices only. Andrew Carnegie was not an apprentice, and so in 1853 the library's doors remained shut to him. But Andrew did not give up. Instead, he sent a letter to a local newspaper lamenting the loss of access. Heartened by this, Colonel Anderson allowed him to use the library again. Andrew has said later in life that it was the kindness of Colonel Anderson that inspired him to set up free public libraries all around the world. It was Andrew Carnegie's boss, Thomas Scott of Pennsylvania Railroad, who taught him how to invest in stock market. Here is one of the first stock notes Andrew Carnegie purchased. That was in 1857, and it's a note from Monongahela Insurance Company. Carnegie describes in his autobiography how he felt when he received his first dividend check for $10. "Eureka, here's the goose that lays the golden egg," he said.
Carnegie made many successful investments in the 1850s, thanks to friends and connections. His main invest income came from the Columbia Oil Company. By 1862, his investments had generated enough profit to enable him to organise an iron railroad bridge company together with the engineers Piper and Schiffler. Rebuilding destroyed infrastructure offered lucrative business opportunities, especially during the American Civil War. Some other examples of his investment portfolio include the Western Union Telegraph Company, 2 horse car companies, the Freedom Iron Company, Woodruff Sleeping Car Company, and then 2 coal companies. Why did they choose Pittsburgh? Pittsburgh was a perfect location for setting up iron and steel businesses, as it was positioned near coal fields, which provided necessary raw materials and also a river which supplied water power.
In 1872, Andrew Carnegie visited Henry Bessemer's steel factory in Sheffield, UK. Seeing Bessemer's success enticed him to join his friend William Coleman in his new venture, setting up Edgar Thomson Steel Works in Braddock, Pennsylvania. Over the years, Carnegie became the major shareholder in the works, and in 1892, Edgar Thomson Works became part of the Carnegie Steel Company. Here, you can see one of the steel beams rolled at Edgar Thomson Works. As per usual, the beam is carrying Andrew Carnegie's name. Edgar Thomson Works was the world's largest manufacturer of steel beams for 3/4 of a century. The company still operates and is now owned by US Steel.
In his autobiography, Carnegie praises being surrounded by the right people who had the knowledge to bring change. He himself never actually worked on the steel factory floor. Andrew gave the following advice: "I tell you all, put all your eggs in one basket, and then watch that basket. Look around you and take notice. Men who do that do not often fail."
Unfortunately, Andrew Carnegie's success often came at the cost of his workers. Over the years, he lowered wages and extended working hours in his factories in order to keep generating profit. The 1892 strike at Homestead Steel Mills that belonged to Andrew Carnegie are still considered to be the bloodiest worker strike in the history of America. Carnegie's businesses continued to grow until 1901, when he decided to sell his shares to J.P. Morgan for $480 million, making him the richest man in the world.
Andrew bought Skibo Castle in 1898, and it became his holiday home, located on the beautiful Dawn of Firth in the Scottish Highlands. This alcove contains some of the family's furniture from Skibo Castle. This includes this fine oil painting of Louise Whitfield Carnegie by Seymour Thomas. This portrait watches over a figure of Andrew sitting at his oak desk. Various photographs of notable visitors to Skibo Castle are also displayed here, alongside the castle's first visitors book.
In 1908, signatures of Bertha von Suttner and Woodrow Wilson can be spotted in the book. Bertha von Suttner was an Austrian novelist and pacifist who in 1905 became the first woman to win Nobel Peace Prize. Woodrow Wilson at that time was still the president of Princeton University. He became the president of the United States in 1913. At Skibo, Carnegie took great pleasure in mixing his guests with complete disregard for their nationality, their politics or religious views and their social standing. His old neighbours and his cousins from Dunfermline came face to face with American politicians, businessmen, novelists, artists and university professors. In Carnegie's opinion, this was something that was good for all of them.
Andrew Carnegie was a staunch supporter of world peace and had already campaigned for peace when he was only 19 years old. As a follower of the philosopher Herbert Spencer, Andrew Carnegie came to believe that every element of the world was progressively evolving, that humanity was passing from an age of conflict into an era of peace. Following a mining disaster in Pennsylvania in 1904, Andrew decided to set up the Carnegie Hero Fund Commission in the USA. It was set up to honour ordinary people who had carried out spontaneous acts of heroism.
Carnegie Hero Fund UK was founded in 1908. It is one of 11 hero funds Carnegie set up in Europe and United States of America. The aim of the Carnegie Hero Fund UK is to recognise civilian heroism and offer financial support to those who have been injured or dependents of those who've lost their lives in trying to help and save lives of others. This beautifully inscribed book, known as the Roll of Honour, is unique to the Carnegie Hero Fund UK. Names of each recognised individual and details of their case are inscribed in the book. If you happen to find a medal or a pocket watch in your family's collection that bears Carnegie's name, it is highly likely that your family members have once been recognised as Carnegie heroes.
In addition to this hero fund, 10 European hero funds were established in the UK, France, Norway, Germany, Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland, and also Italy. Most of them are still active today. The only hero funds that no longer exist are the German and French ones.
In 1903, Andrew Carnegie donated $1.5 million, which is worth approximately $41 million today, towards building of the Peace Palace in The Hague, Netherlands. Duplicate of that check can be seen on display here. The Peace Palace is now home for two institutions, the International Court of Justice of the United Nations and the Permanent Court of Arbitration. Carnegie attended the opening of the Peace Palace in 1913 and was given this beautiful presentation casket and a judge's gavel as a gift. Unfortunately, Carnegie's dream of world peace was not to be, as the First World War broke out just a year after Peace Palace opened.
His wife Louise later stated, henceforth, he was never able to interest himself in private affairs. Andrew had many plans to give away his wealth long before he became the richest man in the world. In 1868, at the tender age of 33, Andrew wrote a note to himself, promising to give away his money for the benefit of others. A remarkable aspect about this note, and the life plan that he outlined in it, is the absence of any external motivating force. Carnegie did not set out to do this because he had been asked by anyone, nor because he had pangs of guilt or shame about his businesses. He was changing his life because he wanted to. This memo is called the St. Nicholas Memo because he was staying at the St. Nicholas Hotel when he wrote it. Andrew made his first major philanthropic gift of £5,000 to Dunfermline in 1873 through the building of a public swimming baths, for which he was awarded the Freedom of the City in 1877. We have the Freedom Casket he received as thanks on display. The first Carnegie Library in the world also opened in Dunfermline. It opened in 1883. On display we have the trowel that Andrew's mother Margaret Morrison used for laying the memorial stone of the new library in Dunfermline. She did this on the 27th of July 1881.
Some of you may know that Andrew Carnegie funded Edinburgh City Library on George Forth Bridge. He used this beautiful trowel to lay the library's foundation stone in 1887. The ceremony took place in summer during Andrew and Louise's honeymoon in Scotland. At the time, Edinburgh was the only major city in the UK which did not have a free public library, which is why Andrew decided to fund one. His statue can still be seen on top of the stairs at the library in Edinburgh. This beautiful trowel is rather special as its handle has been modelled after one of the columns in Dunfermline Abbey, so it has both Edinburgh and Dunfermline connections.
This is the Diplodocus carnegie, a plant-eating sauropod, and it's named after Andrew Carnegie. He actually financed its excavation in Wyoming in the US in 1899. Between 1905 and 1913, Andrew decided to give life-size plasticast copies of this Diplodocus to 8 countries around the globe. They are on display in different natural history museums in Paris, Bologna, Madrid, Argentina, Moscow, Berlin, and Vienna. There is also a copy that belongs to the Natural History Museum in London, but that's been making its way around the British Isles, travelling to different museums, most recently at the Kelvingrove in Glasgow. Andrew Carnegie's aim was to advance world peace negotiations using this dinosaur. It's called his dinosaur diplomacy. Using it, he would demonstrate that different countries had more in common than what divides them.
It is difficult to summarize Andrew Carnegie's philanthropy as it impacted countless individuals, institutions, towns and cities all around the world. The main areas of Carnegie's philanthropy were music, science, education and world peace, which he supported through numerous initiatives. He also gave grants to famous individuals such as Helen Keller, Marie Curie, Booker T. Washington and Walt Whitman, to name a few. Perhaps the most famous building carrying Andrew Carnegie's name, apart from this fantastic little museum here, is Carnegie Hall in New York. Since it opened in 1891, Carnegie Hall has become an aspirational destination to world's musicians. Tchaikovsky, Mahler, George Gershwin, Judy Garland, the Beatles and Rolling Stones have all performed there. Music of all genres has been heard in Carnegie Hall throughout the years.
Did you know that the Carnegie Corporation in New York was responsible for the creation of Sesame Street? The corporation had helped fund research into the educational role of television in children's lives. From this, Sesame Street was born. In many ways, the Cookie Monster is one of Carnegie's greatest legacies. Sesame Street is still very well loved today. The television series covers difficult topics for children in sensitive ways.
By the time of his death in 1919, Andrew Carnegie had given away 90% of his personal wealth, worth around $350 million back in the day and about $52 billion today. Through the 24 organizations that he set up that still carry his name, around $150 of Carnegie money is still spent every minute of every day. Andrew Carnegie set up 24 institutions that carried his name, and most of them are still active today in very diverse fields such as art, education, international affairs, world peace and science. These institutions work independently from each other, but they do have a legacy in common. In 2001, they set up the Carnegie Medals of Philanthropy, which celebrates, recognize and encourage modern-day philanthropists to give away their wealth. Each of the medalists is awarded with a bronze medal carrying the image of Andrew Carnegie, as well as a little bronze bust of Andrew Carnegie. In 2019, to commemorate the centenary of Andrew Carnegie's death, the Carnegie Dunfermline Trust commissioned a new artwork, a portrait of Andrew Carnegie. The portrait was created by Scottish artist Callum Colvin. Callum is known for creating three-dimensional installations onto which he then paints the portrait of the individual. Here in front of me is a pile of books, which ended up becoming Andrew Carnegie's left eye. That's these books right here in the finished work. While the artist was working here at the museum, our visitors were invited to help decide whether Carnegie should be remembered for future generations as a ruthless businessman or generous philanthropist. The same question was also asked from the visitors to the Carnegie Museums in Pittsburgh. The visitors here in Dunfermline decided that it should be Andrew Carnegie's famous memorandum of 1868, where he promised to give away his wealth, that should be chosen to represent him for future generations. And that copy of that letter was included in the work right here. However, the visitors to the museums in Pittsburgh thought it was Carnegie's telegram to Henry Frick from 1892 regarding the Homestead steel mill strikes that is the most representative of his personality. The telegram was also included in the work and can be seen here just below Andrew's left eye. If you were to choose which of these images or objects should be included in the work, which one would you have chosen?
Thank you from the team at the museum for joining us for our digital tour. We hope you enjoyed it and learned lots about the Carnegie story. It is a really fascinating one after all. Perhaps in the future you could come join us in person.